Hi, and welcome everyone to tonight's SAGA session. And my name is Tobias, and I'm the host for these sessions. And SAGA is the Swedish Annual Game Design Awards, and we hold these sessions in collaboration with a Discord channel called Spel Design Babel. And we want to spread knowledge about board game design and design-related topics. For each of these sessions, we invite a special guest to talk about a topic of their choice. And tonight we have invited Jason Lentz, who will talk about playtesting and efficient playtesting in particular. And we will hear about when to playtest and where to playtest and different kinds of playtests as well. Without further ado, welcome, Jason, and I'm very happy that you can join us tonight.
My pleasure. Yeah. Hello. I guess I'll take over the screen sharing.
Absolutely.
All right. 1 second here. There we go. Yeah. All right. Everyone can see it okay? Assume so. Yep. Okay. I'm Jason Lentz. A little bit more about me. I've been designing board games for maybe it's been 10 years now. I've got one full published title under my belts and also a solo mode and an expansion in the works. I'm currently talking with publishers on signing 2 other board games that are in progress. But my day job is a video game designer, and I've been designing games and doing playtesting for about a quarter of a century. And yeah, so here is my talk and the lessons I've learned over the years on how to playtest effectively. So for the agenda, I'm going to talk about when you should start playtesting, where you can find your playtesters, I've broken things down into a few different types of playtesting and what my categories are, and how to run a playtest, and also how to take feedback. That's a big part of it. And also what hasn't worked for me when playtesting. And then I'm wrapping up with just some good questions to ask in your playtest sessions, which I think is probably going to be maybe one of the most useful aspects of this presentation, which is why I put it at the end. So you have to stick through all the way to the end. Let's start at the beginning. So when to start playtesting, and I think as early as possible. As long as there is something that you can get feedback on, you are ready for playtesting. Whether that's like, does this mechanic work, or does my idea, does this sound like a fine thing to do? You can kind of bounce your idea off people. That's kind of a form of playtesting. But over the course of the development of a project, there's going to be different types of playtesting that you're going to want to be focusing on. Initially, you're just focusing on, like, is this fun? Like, is there fun to be had anywhere in these mechanics? Just kind of playing around with stuff. And as you get further into it, you're like, does this kind of work as a game? Like, is this fun repeatable? And you can do it from turn to turn. And I don't even worry about how you even win the game until I've kind of got those things. And then I start figuring out, okay, what are the win conditions? It can, in your prototype, is it possible to win? And hopefully you can get this part of your playtesting done relatively quickly. But you're just kind of iterating on, does the game work, and fine-tuning all these things, and start getting into the balance aspects and making sure that all the choices, that you don't have like false choices, and making sure that everything is kind of balanced in the end, and all different strategies are equally viable. And after that, you're testing, are the rules clear? You're kind of play testing not just the game, but the rule book itself. And in the end, you could do some art play testing. Although if you're pitching to publishers, that might be something that the publisher is going to handle. But if you're self-publishing, yeah, you want to play test your own art as well. And after that, you ship it, and your play testing's done at that point. It's out in the world. It is what it is. It's better than perfect. It's done. So where can you find your play testers? Where can you get feedback? I mean, these are the kind of 6 obvious choices. Your friends and family, your design community is a great resource. Protospiels and conventions are fantastic, and online playtesting groups and the Discord channel associated with Saga, and as well as there's several different Discord channels. Facebook groups as well as can be a good place to meet other people, and board game gatherings, whether they be like even at your friendly local game store or just like a get together. But it's good to keep in mind, like if that group is amenable to play testing something that's not a finished product, but if people are on board with that, you can do it there. Of these groups, I think these three are the best places where you're going to do the majority of your best play testing. So focusing on your design community, and conventions and protospiels are all great way to get feedback from the general public. And the audience for online play testing that's the largest audience for your game that you can find. So here are how I've defined the 4 different types of play testing. You got the solo play testing is just by yourself, obviously, with other designers, getting feedback from your peers, and play testing with other players. The last one is blind play testing. I'm going to go into detail on each of these and when you should really be doing them. So with solo play testing, this is can happen very early, and that's just or you can kind of pepper it throughout there. But most of the solo play testing, I think, is towards the very initial stages of your game, and I think these should be really quick play tests. Don't try and play test like get the whole game functioning in a solo play test. It's there mostly just to figure out, is this mechanic just completely broken? And if it seems like it's working well enough, I think that is the time to start putting it in front of other people. Designers are one of the first groups that I think that's great to get your designs in front of. You're going to get more professional advice and possibly some proposed solutions to some issues you're having. One caveat there is that be careful that designers, we tend to want to propose suggestions to make the game that we want the game to be, not necessarily that the game the designer wants to be. This is something to keep in mind also both when you're receiving feedback and also as a designer when you're giving feedback. But yeah, also highlighting issues and there could be discussions that develop from the playtest itself. It's kind of more fluid, these playtests. And you're looking for different strategies and play patterns that you may not have thought of on your own, or what's intuitive or counterintuitive in the gameplay, exposing exploits and general reaction of your designer playtesters to see what they think. The next group is with players. These are more observational, looking to see how players are reacting, less interjecting, say, well, what if we do this? What if this? It's less kind of exploring in the game, just kind of letting them run their course and seeing how they react. And this group is going to be made up of people like your friends and family, the general public, and you can find the protospiels and conventions. Those are great places to do your play tests with players. And you're looking for the same exact things that you're looking for in the designers group: the strategies, play patterns, what's intuitive, exploits, and general reaction. And then once you have your game fairly solid, you want to start doing the blind play tests. And these are when you kind of hand off the game just with the rules as if the players had purchased it from a store and are figuring out, like they have to figure it out on their own, because you don't come in the box. And these are called blind play tests, often with strangers. It's great if they have no prior experience with the game. And they're as much testing the rule book as they are the game itself. And you're looking for rules clarity and also general feedback from these play tests. So going back to this, like, when do each of these things come into place? Like I said, the solo play testing, that's to the very start. Working with designers, it's kind of all throughout. I think it's good to have designers looking at everything, but maybe not as much leaning on their feedback for art testing, because designers, we are a special niche, and we are not the ones that are going to be our primary audience who are buying this game. It's going to be the general public. So that's when you have your players, like with general players, you're looking for, like, is it balanced? Are the rules clear? And art testing can be a good place for the getting player feedback on. And blind play testing, save that for the very end. If you do your blind play testing earlier, you're kind of using up potential testers for the blind play testing, and you may have significant changes in there that blind play test can be a big ask and a lot of work. So it's best to save those for when you are very confident that your game is pretty much wrapped up and complete, as complete as it can be. These are some bullet points that I got from the Pacificon Protospiel in California, one of the first play tests I went to, or Protospiel events I went to, and they gave out these advice for both play testers or the people running the play tests and the play testers themselves. And I've highlighted these, which is most of them, that I think are particularly relevant for us. And that's like it's the things that you do want to do is, yeah, of course, be articulate, set your playtest goals for your playtesters, kind of let them know what they're in for. Always be polite and patient with your testers, and it's good to adjust your teaching level to experience the style of your players. Meaning, for instance, maybe you have drafting in your game. Do all the players, are they familiar with that term? If they are, then yeah, you can like go up and say it's like sushi go, and if they're unfamiliar with any drafting games, you're going to have to spend a little extra time teaching them what drafting is. And yeah, be clear about your theme, the mechanics, and also the stage of your development of your game. If your game is fairly along in development, that will help players kind of judge gauge what kind of feedback that they want to give you. If you say that, yeah, in a couple of weeks where we're just kind of testing UI and we're going to be sending it off to the printer soon, that's going to, you will get, if you let them know that, you'll be less likely to get feedback of, have you tried taking this competitive game and making it cooperative? Because that's going to be a huge change. But if you're in the very beginning, that is totally valid feedback to get. And something, and if they know that you're in the very beginning, that's something that's, they know that the designer will be open to receive. Also, be respectful of everyone's time. You don't need to finish every game that you start. Sometimes, yeah, players just aren't having a good time. You don't need to have them have a bad time for the entire duration of your game. They can probably give you feedback midway through. And also sometimes designers, they even if they are having a good time, that's okay. I see the feedback I want to give, and they can be ready to give it midway through a game session. And also, don't be afraid to make revisions and rule changes on the spot. I call those hot fixes, where you can adjust. You can see that something isn't working. You can try and fix it there on the spot. Sometimes that's useful in early play tests. Later play tests, it might be worth it to see how things unfold. Things that you don't want to do is don't get defensive when you receive feedback. And also avoid loaded questions. And this is the one they gave, like, is my game not awesome? That kind of puts play testers on the defensive. If they don't think it's awesome, they're not going to really tell you what they feel. They're going to kind of keep that to themselves. And you might get an answer like, yeah, it's okay. Instead of like, I had an issue with this spot over here. And the next page was on how to be a good playtester. And some advice here is, when looking at it from the other side, when you're playtesting games, look for games that fit your gaming preferences and styles. If you are not into dexterity games, don't really, maybe avoid volunteering to playtest someone's dexterity game. You're not their target audience, and your feedback is going to be less valuable than someone who's really into dexterity games and has a lot of experience with them. And when you're playing, focus less on winning and more exploring the design space and trying different things out. It's best to learn these rules quickly, but you don't need to worry about grokking everything. You have the designer there and the rules there. It's okay for you to ask questions of the designer and check the rule book when you're playing. And also, go ahead and ask questions, but take notes while you're playing the game, so you're not diving into this big feedback session in the middle of the playtest. It's better to save that for the end. Also, along the lines of focus more on exploring, if you think you can break the game, prove it, try it out. You may be right. Maybe there's other things that are preventing the game from being broken that way. That's going to be, both of those situations are valuable for the designers to see. And this line, I think, is in there specifically for designers or design-minded players. Focus on the game that is, not the game you want it to be. And yeah, help give them advice that they can use to make their game they want to make. And also, just as in designers need to be articulate and clear when providing feedback, also be clear, direct, and honest about how you feel about the game. And some don'ts: don't distract from the playtest experience with irrelevant side conversations. Like, maybe you haven't seen this designer in a while, you can catch up with them later. And don't interrupt the flow of the game to make big suggestions and criticisms. That's the more about the going back to the do's. It's good to ask questions and take notes, but this is, yeah, save those larger suggestions for after the game. And also avoid judging the components of the art, and they're all prototypes. And unless the designer is specifically asking for feedback on the art, it's good to just kind of, okay, this game may not look like this when it's published and on the store shelves. One exception to that is if I think the art is confusing or misleading, then I think it's worth pointing that out. But in general, like the visuals themselves, that's not super useful for designers. So how to take feedback. Feedback can be this big pill that you may not necessarily feel like you want, but just like medicine, it's going to make your game better. Treat every bit of feedback as if it's a gift, and make sure that your playtesters feel like the feedback they're giving you is absolutely appreciated. Write it all down, even if you disagree with it. And don't argue or debate the feedback, but do try and get at why they feel the way they feel about the feedback itself. One other note I would say that when I have one thing that I have done with when taking feedback is I find that I'm asking similar questions for similar games. Like in my game Dawn of Ulos, there were various things that I would be tracking in every single game, like which factions were used, how many turns was the game, how long was the game, and I made a printout that kind of had all of these metrics that I could just like quickly check things off and write down the players' names and what the player count and which player won, and also had lots of lines for general feedback. But creating that template document that I could print out and write down all my notes helped me create spreadsheets and graphs to figure out, okay, what is my average play time? Is every first, second player, is the win counts the same? Is there any kind of first player advantage or disadvantage? So that's another thing that that has helped me when taking feedback. So here are some things that have not worked for me. Asking the question like, how would you fix this particular thing? It is not the playtester's job to design your game. That is the designer's job to design your game. But it is good to find out why and where they were having trouble in your game. Another thing I've done is I have sent blind playtest copies out to people without any deadlines, and I still have not gotten feedback on some of those copies of my game. Those are just prototypes that I made and even sent updates, and I don't think they ever opened the box. But if you set a date for that, for when they need to send that game on to the next group, that creates a little bit of urgency for them to actually get your game to the table. And if they don't get your game to the table in that time period, they're probably not going to get to your game ever. So it's worth it to just send it on to the next group. And of course, don't try and implement all of the feedback. It's your game. Make the game you want it to be. And some of the feedback you're going to get is going to be in conflict with each other. So you'll need to kind of figure out which way you want to go in that. And usually it's determined by what kind of game you're making, and are those players which one of those is more your target demographic. I have not had any luck with online forums. For all of my blind test copies that I've sent out, I included a little QR code that took them to just a short, like 6-question survey, and I received exactly 0 of those back. But maybe others have had more luck with online forums. But for me, not so much. And again, don't wait until your game is ready, with air quotes. Like I said, I think it's never too soon to start your playtesting. So yeah, here's the juicy part, the good questions to ask, and I've broken it down to before, during, and after the playtests. So these are the before questions. I think it's good to ask what kind of games your playtesters play. This can help identify which is your target audience and maybe which of your playtesters' feedback you should maybe wait a little bit more. Also, it helps you identify kind of what familiarity they will have with your type of game and what kind of teach you should be doing. Like how much detail do you need to explain what drafting is? Another good question, how much time do you have? This will gauge how much of your game that you can play, or maybe you could recommend like, hey, if they only have 30 minutes and your game is a 90-minute game, you can try out my friend's game here. And they've got a 20-minute game. Maybe you could go give that a try and be more effective with both of them. Or maybe there is 30 minutes of your game that you can play test, and you can set up a play test for that. And this is a super simple question, but like, what's your name? Get to know your playtesters. Make them aware that you appreciate them being there, and you appreciate them for being a person who's willing to give the most valuable thing that they have to you, and that's their time. So during the playtests, when someone asks how something works in the game, I think a good thing to do is to turn that back on them and say, well, what do you think should happen? This kind of will help show what's intuitive, and if depending where you are in the playtest, maybe it's good to let them kind of do the rule wrong, or see if they can figure out from the rules itself. Just to see how things go. And sometimes maybe, yes, you can answer, but yeah, I think first it's good to question, like, see what they think is intuitive, and maybe consider, maybe that's something that your game should be doing. Midway through the playtest, I like to do a temperature check and say, is everyone okay to keep playing? We've been playing for 45 minutes or an hour or however long. And that's usually for longer games. And I do this to see if, 2 things. One, maybe they already have the feedback they want to give ready to go, and also making it's to see how engaged they are. If they're already ready to check out, there's no sense in punishing them and making them play the full game something they're not quite enjoying. And at the end of the game, before scoring, I think a good question is, who do you think is winning and why? And this shows kind of what the expected dominant strategies are, and it can be revealing both for the players and the designers. When that doesn't line up, and then if everybody could see like this one person was winning because of this, yeah, you can point out like overpowered strategies that people are using. And most of this during the feedback, the best questions you can ask are nothing at all and just observe. Take note of things like how long the game took in both in terms of turns and time. And like I talked about with my special notes, are there any special metrics you want to keep track of? Look for what strategies people tried or didn't try. And it's good to go into a playtest with a specific thing that you're evaluating. And so, yeah, just take note of, see how they interacted with your changes, and are they working as you expected? Observing if people are checking their phones and checking out of the game. That's kind of a temperature check to see if they're really engaged with the game or not. And see if there, over the course of several playtests, if there are rules that are commonly missed, like what are players trying to do that isn't allowed? And maybe question yourself of like, should we allow that? Do we need these restrictions? And also listen for what questions the players are asking. That can tell a lot about kind of maybe what's not clear, or what kind of things that the players are interested in doing in your game. And so this is where most of the questions come in. And at after you've had the whole game, you've had the experience, and then you can start going to the questions after the play test. And I've got a couple pages of these. There's a good question I like to ask immediately is, how long do you think the game took? And preferably without them looking at their watch. And because if they underestimate the time dramatically, that probably means they're having a good time. And conversely, if you've played a 45-minute game and they think it took 90 minutes, you may have some things to work on. Instead of asking what wasn't working, change it around and kind of make them think more critically about it and say, if you had to remove or change one thing, what would you remove? This kind of takes the pressure off them to be harsh and critical to like a lot of people pleasers are not going to want to tell you that, oh, your game was broken. But if you give them a challenge and kind of paint them into a box of, okay, you have to remove one thing. What's the one thing that you would remove? It doesn't necessarily mean that it kind of takes the burden off them. They're not saying that your game is bad, but okay, I could remove this one thing from your game. And conversely, if you want to find out what's working, you can talk about what was your favorite moments in the game. And if those are the moments that you want, or the aspects of your game you want to make sure that you keep, or maybe even add more of that into your game. Another way to ask and get a more honest answer of, do you like this game, is how much would you expect to pay for this game, assuming it was like fully arted in the store. And that can also that will gauge expectations of kind of what tier of game. Is this like a 90 euro game, or is this more like a 20 euro box experience for them? And I'm sure that we all will have our own ideas of what our kind of price point will be on the shelves, and seeing what kind of disconnect there is can be telling. And a good question for research is asking them, what other games, do they know of any other games like this? And that could be a good opportunity to take those games, play them, see what you can learn from them, or maybe did they even understand what your game is about? if they gave you some wildly different game, like maybe there was something wasn't clicking with them, and maybe that's an indicator that maybe their feedback is not going to be the most useful for you in afterwards as you go forward. Another good question is, well, why do you think you won or lost? Like this is another way to see, do they understand the game, and also help identify if there are overpowered or underpowered options that you might need to tweak. And a few more questions. And this is these first three are kind of about teaching the game and communicating the rules. What do you wish you knew when you first started playing? Or is there anything you feel that you don't understand even after finishing the game? Or was there anything missing from the player boards and or reference cards? All of these are kind of different aspects of the teach and the rules. And also, could anything be explained better? This will help you find out what's intuitive, or maybe it's something in that's being communicated in the graphic design of the game, or maybe it's something that you can improve in the teach or the rules themselves. And one last question I like to ask is, would you like to be notified when it launches? What's your email? Like, it's never too early also to start building your following. Even if you are planning to pitch to publishers, it's useful to be able to say, like, yeah, here's all these people that have been not just play testing my game, but they're interested to know when they're excited for when it comes out. And was that a chat message that popped up? I just saw a brief message pop up. But yeah, I'm just about done. This next bit is like, what are some good questions that you guys have found? I'm going to turn this back on you and ask the group, are there any questions that you guys have found useful, or any playtesting tips that you guys have to share? Because I know when I put this together, I had some ideas, but when doing the research for this, I found a few more examples and tips of things that I can do to improve my own playtesting. But I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to this. Crickets.
Yeah, I can just speak for everyone when I start with saying those questions that you listed here are very good. I have used some of them before, but not maybe half of them, but there were some really great questions.
For me, yeah, there's a lot of those questions that I found while researching other people's approach. In fact, I have one more talk that I almost wanted to redesign the questions page. I found this podcast by Jessica Hammer, and I made a QR code that you can go right to the Spotify playlist. But she breaks down other tips and aspects of playtesting, like addressing the fear of playtesting, the kind of anxiety that people can feel when they're putting their game in front of others, and some good ways to reframe that and kind of use that as a motivator. Or ranking the quality of feedback, talking like looking for kind of rank it by what feedback is specific and critical and actionable, and kind of use, once you have this wealth of feedback, you can use that to kind of prioritize which feedback maybe you should act on. And also going over feedback with the peers. It can be good to kind of, even before you act on the feedback, bounce it off another designer. And she talked about a good quip about having successful play tests versus useful play tests. It's much better to have a useful play test than a play test that went really well. Often, like, if the feedback is, "Oh, I loved it, it's great," it's like, yeah, what can you do with that? Is your game perfect? You probably know it can be improved. But yeah, and her last point is the last point that I've jotted down here. There's more actually in the presentation, but try and look for improved questions. Like, what could be improved? Or is there something about the teach that can be improved, or the game could be improved? These are the questions that she has found most helpful, and also found that those are the ones least asked. And she talked about this IOTA model, where you've got asking questions is in this kind of 4 different categories in this order. So first, players talk about their experience, then their observations, and their theories about what happened, and then give advice. So, like with the experience, that's, she's asking people about, like, share their experiences in the form of, "I felt," or "I chose this." Yeah, thank you, Tor, for the link there. And how you thought, and just like the concrete things about your experiences of playing the games. And then you can open up like, what do people observe? Not just the players, but maybe people watching the game. Like, "Oh yeah, I saw this person, they did this really move," or "I saw Jen and she was getting really frustrated at this," and those observations. And then after that, you can theorize, like, why was Jen upset about this thing? Or why was Bill so excited about this action? And then give the advice of how you could address the theories. I think a lot of times playtesters will kind of jump straight to the advice, and you may not miss the critical information about why they feel that way about their advice that they're recommending. Like, you don't know what problem they're actually trying to solve with their advice. I have not tried this out myself. I can imagine that trying to get your playtesters to be very organized in how they give the feedback could be a challenge, but maybe not. Like I said, I've not tried this. I would like to try this out myself for a future playtest. But yeah, that's the real end of my presentation. We can go back to any questions or Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you done with your presentation? So we start opening up for all kinds of questions now, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Then I will also say thank you very much for the presentation. And well, the floor is open for anyone who has a question. You can raise your hand with the tool in the or you can write something in the chat, of course. But I wanted to ask you, because at a lot of playtests that I have attended, both as a playtester and a designer, there has been a very short amount of time afterwards for the feedback, giving and receiving feedback. So if you can narrow this down to 1 or 2 questions, what
Yeah.
would you focus on? What would be your primary question to ask?
Sure. Yeah.
In general, of course, it depends on the game.
Pull that back up again.
Times.
So yeah, some of the questions that I would prioritize over others. I like that. How long do you think the game took? That's a quick question, quick answer that can tell you a lot. And yeah, if you had to remove one thing, what would you remove? And what was your favorite moment? I would probably skip, because usually you can identify those while you're observing. And similarly, did they like the game? I think that's stuff that you can mostly get from observing. The research question of what other games, I think that one could be skipped. Let's see, what's the next page here? Do I have any others that are? These are some questions that I don't typically ask, but I found from researching other people's approach to playtesting.
Yeah, I'm happy with the first that you pointed out there. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other questions? I see that Daniel has written in the chat. I don't think that will be visible in the YouTube video, so I will read it out. He says, excellent questions, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. I usually start out with asking players to name things they liked and one thing that they didn't like. It's important to know what works as well as what does not. It highlights to you what players think is the best part, things you can push when pitching the game. Asking them to start off with them naming something positive also usually makes players more okay with them going into the stuff they didn't like. And that's a great tip as well, I think, because you allow players to be picky and point out something negative. And at least when you're playtesting with other Swedish people, we try to be very nice to each other and refrain from saying the negative stuff. So
yeah, I think it's a good way to kind of prime the pump, get them in the habit of answering questions, start them out with a softball. What did you like? And yeah, they can usually give you something, and then you can, like Daniel said, hit them with the more helpful questions for designers. But both are helpful.
Yeah. Okay. I had one more. How do you feel about when, or do you instruct or encourage playtesters to talk through their turns, or
yes, if you can get players to talk about what they are thinking as they're playing, that is super useful. And that's something I try and do when playtesting too, is I'll go through my thought process, like, okay, I'm trying to decide between these two options. I feel like this one's the better one, or this card is just so much text, I don't even want to bother with it. I'm going to go with this thing and that I understand, and not having to let the designer guess what's going on in your head is fantastic. So yeah, if you can get your players to talk through their turns and be less conscious about, like, all right, my strategy is my private thing that I want to keep to myself. I don't want the other players to figure out what I'm doing. It says, no, you're not trying to beat them. You're trying to beat my game. We're trying to figure out what's not working and what is working. Yeah, good.
Yes. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Left them all speechless.
I can see if it. No, nobody is raising their hands. But yeah, I think there's a lot to think about when playtesting, and I have seen a lot of these playtesting forums where you either as a designer or a playtester, you will fill out a form while you are playtesting, and it can have stuff like a box for graphic design issues and stuff like that. So you can just easily check off what you want to mention in the feedback part of the playtest. So have you used anything like that? Mentioned that. I might have missed it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you mentioned it already, but I must have missed
it. I haven't used for checking off like specific features, but for more like the metrics that I want to track of like, okay, what factions were used in a game or how long a game took. I'll have a sheet of paper with all these things I can just like quickly tick off, like, okay, these 5 factions were used, and I little tick marks for how many turns were made, and kind of have those in reserve spaces on my note sheet. But it's mostly just kind of open lines of text, or open lines where I can just jot down whatever kind of feedback. Edmund had a question here. That I said, you said you should not argue with the feedback. Do you have any situations when I'm assuming that anywhere I've argued with the feedback anyways? Yes, and it's almost always been a mistake. Yeah, there have been situations like someone suggested something that I had already tried, and I found out that it didn't work, and I wanted to bring that up and say, yeah, I did try that, and it didn't work for this, but in retrospect, I don't think I should have done that, because it's instead, and later when as I've become a more mature designer, I've encountered that situation again. I think I handled it better by just kind of saying, oh, that is something to consider. I'll jot that down. And then I throw it away when they're not looking. But in the moment, yeah, and they want to give me other feedback as well, instead of shutting them down.
Yeah, you learn to read the room, so to speak, and know when to mention that you already had play tested that thing that they suggested. I think in some cases, in some playtesting groups, I think it could be valuable just to move the discussion forward. So you can say that, oh, I have actually tried that, and it caused this and this problem. So I don't think that will work, but I will consider it for the future, or something like that. But
yeah.
I
might say maybe if you're going over it with other designers, that could be a case where it's more okay to kind of explore the feedback and not completely argue with them, but like point out these in that situation, like, I've tried this, and then kind of redirect the discussion. But for general public that aren't really approaching it from a design perspective, I think it's almost always better not to argue, but maybe you could explore some points further, and when you're just working with designers. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Daniel writes, how do you handle playtesters that Christopher wrote before him. Do you consider player game preference and how to factor that into the feedback they give?
Yes. No. Yeah, if they tell you that this isn't really their type of game, that doesn't mean you should write all of their feedback off. But if they're like giving you suggestions of things you could change that don't fit with the game you're making, I think it's okay to like, tell them that's an interesting point. I'll consider that. the polite way of filing that away into your circular filing bin, aka the trash bin. But but don't tell them that. Yeah, you obviously can't take all the feedback they give you, but yeah, figuring out you're gonna maybe encounter some super fans. Listen to them exceptionally. Like what are they liking about the game, and if you introduce something they didn't like, think about real hard if you want to add that or keep that feature in your game. Yeah, I think we can go into Daniel's question of how do you handle playtesters that go off on tangents? So he's had a few where one player is dominating, giving the feedback, and oftentimes wanting to discuss how to change things over talking about what they experienced. That's a good question and a tough problem. I wonder if this system, the Edo system, could help wrangle in those players, but that's kind of, I feel like you have to do that from the get-go rather than trying to impose this after the conversation's gone off in all directions. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if this helps with that. But yeah, in the event that you haven't followed the system or the system isn't working, I think you just have to kind of be the moderator and say, yep, let's put a pin on that. I want to get back to like player like Jen. Did you have any thoughts on anything that you found counterintuitive or something you thought was overpowered, or any kind of general feedback? Yeah, bring it to someone else and kind of help the less boisterous feedback givers give them an opportunity to speak up. That's something that you kind of have to moderate as the designer and running the play tests. It's making sure that everyone is getting a chance to speak.
Yes, and that is actually a tough one.
Yeah, much easier said than done.
Yeah, exactly. As I mentioned before, we are Swedish,
Yeah.
So we try to not try to say stuff in order to not be able to hurt anyone's feelings at all, and stuff like that. But yeah, so
if it helps by steering the conversation back to the people who are being kind of drowned out, you can think of it as sheltering their feelings and making them feel like they are heard. And so you're maybe helping everyone else out by kind of putting a bit of a damper on the person who's running away with the steering in the conversation.
Yes. Yeah, and you can always say that we have to move on to another point in the discussion now, and I will gladly take your feedback as written afterwards if you find the time to write it down, and I will gladly read it.
Yep. And they probably won't write it
down. Then you don't.
Yeah. And odds are they probably won't write it down either.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But yeah, good tip.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any raised hands or anything in the chat. Okay. So I think we will conclude this session then. I want to thank you again, Jason, for joining us and giving us this presentation and answering all of our questions. And thank you to everyone in the audience who has joined us tonight as well. Yes, we will take a break of. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Separate from playtesting, but are there topics that people would like to hear from you in the future? I may come back to one of these if I'm re-invited. Some potential things I was considering for giving. Was somewhat short notice in giving this talk, but some other things I was considering is I recently did a workshop for my job as a game developer is world design, and the big question that a lot of people have is like, that's cool. What is that? And so and even people within my company weren't super sure what world design was. And so I made almost kind of a board game exercise to help communicate what world design is. I could give a talk on that. And I know there was already a talk about the differences between video games and board games and what the two different disciplines can learn from each other. That's also a topic that I could also share my thoughts on. And I've released one published game. I can talk about my experience specific to Dawn of Ulos, a fantasy-themed investment game. I don't know if anybody is interested in hearing anything about any or all of those topics. But yeah,
I think they all sound interesting. So you have an audience of one at least. Yeah. But I don't. I think we can continue discussing that after the
Sure.
short break,
Yeah.
if that's okay, and everyone can take some time to think about it. And okay. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. And we'll see each other in about 10 minutes for an open discussion about the topic and any other topics. Thank you, and bye.
Bye.